to the culvert, a tunnel where he took and he violently raped her. Her 3/4 of her head was smashed in. 3/4 of her brain was hemorrhaged. He threw her up against the wall and raped her as blood was gushing out of her head. So he went down and you could see the shape of her body outlined in her blood. These are the kind of illegal criminals that President Trump wants to get out of our country. This man, he fled his country, El Salvador, because he was accused of murdering a woman there. He made his way as a getaway through Texas, came into our country, went to Los Angeles, assaulted a 9-year-old girl and her mom before making his way from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast to Maryland to that day where he killed my daughter. These criminals that are coming over have access to the whole country. It's not that we think that, because it's, a couple 100 miles from the border, that the other states or the other cities and towns are safe. We're 1,800 miles from the border. And he made his way into our tiny town and murdered my daughter. This is the kind of criminal President Trump wants out of our country. And I am so grateful. I've met with President Trump several times, and I can honestly say that he's heard the cry of a mother and that he genuinely cares. And the reason why I tell you the violence, and I'm trying to put a picture in your mind, is because these are not just the rapes or the murders that you see on TV and you become so desensitized to the crime. These are violent animals that attack women and children. And not all the illegal immigrants that have come over are criminal like this, but there is a good majority that is, and they need to be removed from our country. And so I am so grateful to President Trump and for the things that he has done to close the southern border. But what a lot of people don't realize is that I lived in northern New England for over 25 years. And so I'm familiar with the northern border, that part of the country. And I was there just a month ago, and I am surprised and amazed at the amount of immigrants that have come in that are from the Congo, from Sudan, from the Middle East. It is like unheard of compared to just a couple years ago. We have the world that has come into our country, and they have come here to weaken our country, and they have come here to cause chaos. They're not here for our benefit. And again, we're not against immigration if it's done legally, but having open borders and not vetting the people that are coming in, it's not rocket science to know that bad actors are going to come in also. And we need to protect our families. And so with that, I'm just wondering, because we need to protect and to close our northern borders, what can be done to safeguard our borders, all of them, but then also to make sure that they don't come back into our country? Because this Godaway tried 3 times to come into the country before he was a Godaway coming through. So, thank you.
And that's the biggest concern, is that people, want to know what we can do to make sure this doesn't keep happening. And once we deport someone that is a criminal, that they don't come right back or come right back into our country, and then we're looking for them again. President Trump has been extremely aggressive since the very beginning in working with other countries and negotiating with them. And I think Marco Rubio has done a fantastic job as a Secretary of State. He's just done an amazing job. In order for us to deport someone, we not only have to go find them, and especially these criminals, go find them, then go through their due process hearings, and not even that, their paperwork, get in front of judges, get them prosecuted, then talk about travel papers and get that arranged with the other country, and then have them face consequences there as well, because we don't necessarily want to turn a violent criminal like that back over to their country and have them be turned loose. So that has been a key part of our negotiations with all of these other countries, is what will happen to them when they return there, and how will we keep track of them to know that they're staying there and not coming back to our country. Yeah. And then the security and the upgrades we need in technology at our border is incredible. You know, even in the first Trump administration, we had the opportunity to build about 800 miles of wall. We built the infrastructure, but we didn't get the chance to install the technology that really does complete the entire system. We need the technology that has the surveillance equipment, the sensors that tell us when someone is getting close, so we can deploy people and officers that would be there. That still needs to be completed. And I've talked with many of our elected officials that serve on the northern border. And one of the senators from New Hampshire said to me, she said, frankly, in New Hampshire, where our border is, she said there's flower pots is what we've got for security. You know, we don't have, you know, while we tighten up what we have in other areas of the country, they're going to be crossing through other states, into other states where there has been nothing before, but they're finding new ways to get into this country. So it's not just dealing with what we know were our vulnerable areas before, but the entire border, and making sure that we're building those relationships with other countries to have their information and their data to ensure that they don't get back into this country. President Trump has removed over 280 known terrorists that were on our terrorist watch list. Known terrorists. And those are people from the Middle East. They're people from China, from Iran, from all over the country, Central America. The reason I so appreciate Patty is I can't even imagine the kind of bravery it takes to tell the story of what happened to her daughter. I can't imagine what that's like. But I also can point back to times in my life where people told me a story and it changed me forever. So we can sit up here and quote all the statistics in the world, right? And tell you, well, we have 3,000 people in Michigan that die every single year from fentanyl. And you can talk about that, but when you hear a story like that, it just changes your life forever. Because you can't even imagine what kind of an animal would do something like that. And the unfortunate thing with my job is I hear those stories every day. I hear them in fact, yesterday they handed me these sheets. Every day I get sheets of the bad people that we've arrested that day across the country. And so every day, this is just a few of them that I have. In fact, I didn't even remember to take them out. They're not even supposed to be up here with me. But this gentleman was from Guatemala, 32-year-old. He got aggravated assault on police officers in Colorado. He's been threatening their lives, and tried to murder one of them. This individual out of Guatemala has a conviction for felony rape of a victim under 17 years old. And this is who lawyers are right now fighting to keep him loose and to let him go free into our country. This individual attacked, robbed, and beat up and victimized a senior citizen over 65 years old, a disabled senior citizen, and went after him. This individual had 4 counts of rape of a child under 16 years old, 2 counts of statutory rape of a child, was released again by the Biden administration, 2 counts of indecent assault and battery on a child under 14 years old, 4 counts of exhibiting nude children and possession of child pornography. This individual's from Brazil, 12 different sexual offenses, and was still running loose on our streets, and in a state where that governor and that local leadership did not want to give us the opportunity to go out and get this individual off the streets. And we went and did it anyways, without their help and without their backup, because it was important to keep people safe. But just know that this is the work that President Trump, he heard Patty's story and heard her talk about Rachel, and it changed him forever. And he gives us the opportunity to spend time with these angel families and angel moms, and we are changed forever. And that's why we get up every day and do what we do, is because we don't ever, I hope someday they come to me and they say, guess what? I don't have any pictures or people that, because we don't have any more in this country, that these people are gone and they're not here anymore, and our streets are safe again. But with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, Patty, thank you so much for your love, your courage, your bravery, and your strength. I have 3 little boys, 11, 10, and 6, and I can't even imagine. And I think anybody who has children in this room, regardless of how old they are, when you heard that story, you thought about your child. Well, for every Rachel, there are 1,000 more. For every Michael Filippelli, who died at 17 of a fentanyl overdose, there are thousands more. And we have this legacy of telling the truth and parents making the hard stories, just like Mamie Till Mobley, who in the wake of her son's lynching said, I want them to see my baby. She knew that America needed to see that story in order for that to resonate so other lives can be saved. Patty, thank you again. You are saving lives through your pain. Mr. David Flute, also somebody who understands we need to do every single thing it takes. President Trump is doing everything it takes, and most notably, Secretary Noem nailed it. Passing the One Big Beautiful Bill is a great, biggest step in the right direction to secure our borders, to build the wall, to get the comms and tech and training that we need to secure our southern and northern border, and we're working hard. Already passed it through the House, so again, talk to your senators to make sure that we prioritize so we don't have any more Rachel Morrins. The Secretary also mentioned that we are correct in tying every single thing we can, economics to security, because as the Secretary mentioned, in order to make sure these people don't return, we need the buy-in of these people to keep those their own citizens when we send them back. And President Trump, using the leverage that we have to negotiate in good faith so that we have partners and not dependents, is absolutely correct. We need to close these loopholes. And among the most gaping loopholes are tribal lands that are being exploited by traffickers. And Senior Tribal Advisor on Indian Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security, Mr. David Flute, is here because he understands what the gaps is, what the loopholes are, and he's dedicated to respectfully and decisively closing them. Mr. Flute, thank you for your time and for your service.
Well, first of all, thank you, Congressman, for hosting me here in your great state, and thank you to all the Michigan people here for having me. As an American Indian that loves this country and has served this country, I want to recognize our veterans that are in this audience too that have served. I see your brother here with the Iraq hat, and I've seen a couple other here. So, brother, thank you for your service. Right on. I also want to thank Secretary Noem for lassoing me in from South Dakota to come here and work for her. You know, I've worked with her when I was a tribal chairman for the Sistenwapton Sioux tribe, and she was a member of Congress. And if you ask the secretary, what did Chairman Flute come to you with? It was always public safety. So I know her heart has always been with public safety, and especially in Indian country. You know, there's probably 40 or 50 tribes that extend from the northwest to the very northwest part of this country to the northeast of this 5,000 miles plus of the northern border. And one of the stories that, when I hear Patty's story, and I got to meet her, I'm a strong believer in God, I'm very spiritual, and she had a connection to our Sioux people at home that I'm going to visit with her after this, and just fascinating to meet her and to hear her story. But them stories also happen in Indian country, what the secretary had pointed out. These people that she is going after, there's been murders of young Indian people in Indian country. I hear the story of President Stiffarm from the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in Montana. The cartel, as much as I don't like to say it, their sophistication and their understanding of the lack of law enforcement in Indian country, they attack our tribal officials. He testified before Congress that cartel threatened him and other tribal leaders. If they came before Congress, they would kill them. And so when a tribal chairman is living in Indian country with the vast lands of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, other states along this border, or that are close to this border, and they're getting threats like this from cartel because they know, again, I don't like to say this, but they come in and they bully our tribal leaders. And as the secretary said, we could talk about the problems all day, and if I could, Madam Secretary, there's one thing that I've really picked up from her, working for her when she was our governor, what her dad had shared with her. It's kind of along the same things my dad had shared with me. We don't just talk about the problems, Kristi. We go out and we fix them. And it's something my father had shared with me. If you see something that needs to be done, go do it. And so I'm ready here. I don't care who's listening. I'm ready here to try to kick some ass and make some things happen here with the Department of Homeland Security. So, but, the authority with jurisdiction mostly lies with the tribes. They are a quasi-sovereign nation, meaning they're a nation within a nation, but they have the ability and the authority to make laws to enforce upon their people. They have the ability to enter into partnerships with our state and local law enforcement. And that's where tribal leadership really needs to stand up. They need to not just wave the paper in the air and say they're a treaty tribe or that they're sovereign. They need to exercise that sovereignty and enter into partnerships and agreements. So I'm very encouraged to hear of the great work the sheriff and the gentleman here to my right that are working on those things. And I really hope to build on that. It's something the secretary has certainly hammered home, not just in our state, but across this country. And that's something I'm trying to do for her and for the president as well, too. And if you want to make a difference, then make a difference, and that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here to try to do. And again, just putting it in every day. Again, those issues in Indian country, those open borders, those cartel they know that tribes lack the law enforcement, the real boots on ground out there to really police those borders. And so if tribes would partner, one of the solutions is partnering with the federal government, partnering with the state government. And I don't want to be, like President Reagan said, I'm here from the federal government, I'm here to help or something like that. That's not what we're here to do. Tribes need to exercise fully their sovereignty and set up the politics aside and just enter into these agreements with state, local law enforcement. It's something I firmly believe in, the secretary firmly believes in. And just lastly, there's just to give some numbers here real quick, in North Dakota, Spirit Lake, meth trafficking, Washington, the Lumi, Makah, the Colville tribes, trafficking, human trafficking, drug smuggling, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the list goes on. And I'm not going to sit up here and give the stats, as the secretary said, or just talk about the problem. So just some real quick things about DHS, if I could, Madam Secretary, quick. We've got to partner with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We really do. And I think the last administration just really screwed some things up. Tribes sued Secretary Holland. They sued President Biden. And so that kind of goes to show you the radical behavior they can be. They really don't care what party you are. They just want to get something done. And so we're trying to work with our HSI colleagues in Homeland Security, HSI, ICE, and try to partner up with the mobile enforcement teams in BIA to really go out there and as I said, to kick some ass out there. So thank you for having me.
Great. Let me tell you a little bit about Dave that he didn't share with you. I was so impressed with him when I got elected. In South Dakota, we only have one congressman because we're a big state, but not that many people. And as the congresswoman from South Dakota elected, I had 9 tribes that I would work with, 9 different tribal leaders and chairmen or presidents that would come in and visit with me about their needs. And they would come in with a plethora of things, and I would look at the fact that they had gotten millions of dollars from the federal government over and over again, that they still, though many times, could never pass an audit, could never prove where those dollars went. Their communities were the most victimized in my state. In fact, at one point when I was serving in Congress, out of the top 11 poorest counties in the nation, I had 5 of them. And they were all on our tribal areas. People, 80 to 90% unemployment, 90% alcoholism, only 15 to 20% of their kids were graduating from high school, just no hope and desperation. And you see criminals come in to this area and embed and instill fear and take over a whole community, where I as a state didn't have any jurisdiction to go in to enforce public safety. I as a governor, because they're a sovereign nation, didn't have the opportunity to go in there and help protect their communities. Their tribal government had to do it. And many times their tribal council or their chairman weren't bold enough to fight the cartels or the affiliates that were there or the criminals and the professionals that were in there threatening their lives. Dave Flute was always tough and strong. He would come and talk to me and tell the truth about the criminals that were there, what he needed for help. In fact, I remember many of them would come in with a list of 10 things that I could do. Dave would come in and he would say, I just need a jail. I just need a jail. I will arrest the criminals, and I will put them in jail, and I will keep my people safe. That's what I need. And I thought, wow, this guy totally understands what it means to be a leader and to come into an area and be responsible for his people. I made him my tribal affairs secretary in my cabinet when I was governor. And he faced great persecution for that because I was a law and order governor and I was calling out the cartels and their activity. They were coming and bringing drugs and trafficking drugs across the southern border and coming and using it and distributing it through tribal areas because the Biden administration wouldn't go in there and enforce federal law at all. The Biden administration would allow them free rein, and they had this safe haven in the middle of the country to do human trafficking and drug trafficking, and I called them out, and with Dave being my tribal affairs secretary, faced a lot of persecution for that, but he stood strong and he said, she's telling the truth, and we need to address this and stop this facilitation of what is happening with these dangerous people in our country. I will tell you that I asked Dave to come to Homeland Security because of his passion. The man served our country, served in the military, deployed to the Middle East at a time of war, fought for our country, and said that he wants to spend every day of his life making sure that America stays as safe and as great as it always has been. And we're just so blessed to have him here. Homeland Security doesn't often have someone who understands Indian country and how they need security, and they deserve security too. Their children deserve hope in their homeland and on their tribal lands. And Dave is the one who's going to help us build that partnership with other agencies and with tribes to ensure that they have every opportunity that every other person in this country does as well.
Thank you, Secretary. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flute. Thank you for your service. We have both been to war, and we didn't go to fight for this country to come back here and allow terrorists through our borders. And I appreciate your partnership here. Someone else who understands the need to fight for safety and security and put their own life on the line is my friend, President of Police Officers Association Michigan, Jim Tignelli. Jim, yes, please. Jim is a consummate professional. He's a law enforcement officer through and through, and he does so because he is exceedingly compassionate. He loves his community. He loves his law enforcement officers, and he has put his life on the line to protect those who protect us. So Jim, thank you for being here today. And what are some things that we can learn? What are some things that we can glean? And how can we better cooperate with our law enforcement officers to keep our streets safe?
Very kind of you, Congressman and Madam Secretary. Thank you for having me here today. I go off track just for a second to let you know that one of the unintended consequences of putting this group together is that I met Dave. Yeah. And turns out we actually have a common thing that we are working on that we would never have known had we not met upstairs here. And we've got a plan. So all of a sudden that may be good for all the Indian tribes for something that we're working on here in Michigan. So I don't know, we're going to see. But it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And the only other thing I guess I'd have to tell you is that when you talk about the big, beautiful bill, don't look towards Michigan because you're going to get no help here.
That's true.
Okay. Well, the best I can do for you is say we've endorsed Mike Rogers for Senate for next year, and we'll see what we can do. But I don't think there's a hammer big enough in my toolbox to get either of the two that are there now to vote yes. So, sorry about that. As Congressman said, I'm the president of the Police Officers Association for about 30 years. We represent about 14,000 law enforcement personnel in both peninsulas, so we touch all four corners and all parts in between. It's about 20% fewer police officers than there were in 2001, oddly enough. The academies are mostly empty, but we're working on it. And really and truly, this president makes things happen that he probably doesn't even realize, and some of it is pride in this job, pride in the jobs that we have, the people that we represent, and we start hearing better things from academies, and I think a lot of it is because he gives a lot of people hope that we didn't have in the last 4 years.
I absolutely think he does. You know, our recruitment has been doing much better the last several months just because I think of his leadership, and we're in charge of all the federal law enforcement training under Homeland Security, and we are seeing enrollments come back now and people being willing to sign up and serve again.
I see that, and it's encouraging, and I sense it here in Michigan as well.
I hope so.
And that's something we haven't seen in probably 10, 15 years, but certainly the last 4 years, everybody just left, they fled the job. But I noticed this morning that the assault on ICE officers went up 500%. And if anybody can think about 500%, you realize what a huge number that is. But let me put it in perspective for you. In the United States, the police officers, since 2023, the physical assaults on police officers has gone up from 25,000 to 77,000 police officers physically assaulted. Now, that's about 300%, using a little MB high math there. That's something that I think goes unnoticed. And I want to tell you, most of the guys that do this job don't come in and tell you they got punched in the nose. Because they're embarrassed, they're angry, they don't want anybody to know. So if that 77,000 sounds like a lot, it's probably not. But those are physical assaults too. Those aren't this, pushing and shoving stuff. And I believe much of this can be attributed back to the open border that we suffered through for the last 4 years. All of that talk about, well, if Congress would just give me the power, how that happened. One of the great lines and I love President Trump, and he knows it. One of the great lines was, all we needed was a different president. I think that was the word that he used, and I thought, son of a... I don't think Congress had I don't think a lot of the Congress had much to do with that. But, with 10 million people coming in over those 4 years, and that's probably half of what really happened, and there's no consequences to it. You're given a traffic ticket, somebody might have got here today for parking or for 5 over the speed limit, and a promise to show up someday, but we don't know where you're going to be or how we're going to find you, and then we battle you as we do it. What I saw there with the no consequence, and this is not a scientific poll, this is a Jim Tiganelli poll, which is probably as scientific as you could ever ask for. What we discovered here was that if the consequence of breaking the law coming into this country means getting a bus ticket or a plane ride, a debit card and a cell phone, if that's the bad things that happen to you, what I think happened, and why I think a lot of those assaults are up, is because our homegrown criminals said, it's worth it. The old days of us turning the lights on or saying, stop, hold on, police, vaporized. Right. Now when they see the lights or they hear that command, they run or they assault or they flee the scene. And that's over with here now. And like I said, that's going to be a slow process to cure because you're building a generation of them. Last year in Michigan, we had 3 police officers shot and killed while they were working. And none of them were in a gunfight. I don't know if anybody realizes that. You say, well, nobody here is going to say out loud, well, it's part of the job. It's not. Nobody goes to work to get killed. But what happened is one of them was on a traffic stop. One was helping a homeless guy in a busy city. And one of them was tailing a stolen car. None of these guys got a shot off. These were guys that were ambushed and murdered in this state. And that's because there was no consequences anymore. It's become part of the challenge now to convince them that it's bad to do bad things. It's going to be a slow process, but we're up for it. We're good at it. We're going to be fine. Fentanyl, we spoke about that. Sheriff, it's a huge number over there. I've thought about in Livonia, which is one of America's safest cities. They got 2 kilos of fentanyl on a traffic stop last year. And when they broke that down for me, what they basically said was that would be enough to kill every resident of the state of Michigan. I mean, think about that. That was in the back seat of somebody's car. We had a Detroit police officer that was overcome by fentanyl holding a driver's license that he got from a driver because that license had been in the fentanyl. They had to revive him on the street. The southern border, we heard a little bit about it earlier, and I know with Dave here. The northern border is about 3 times the length of the southern border. And what's happened is people think that because Michigan is surrounded by the Great Lakes, which they are, that the border's in the middle of the water. And so that means nobody can walk across Lake Erie, nobody can walk across Lake Huron. But the fact is they've been crossing that river, that lake, illegally since the Prohibition era. Canada lets everybody in, and it's just we're the only part of the border that's north of Canada, right here. Okay. And I remember supporting President Trump. We endorsed you and encouraged them to have you as Secretary of Homeland Security. I cannot believe I've seen so much out of you in 4 months, and all I ever saw in the last 4 years was somebody sitting in front of Congress saying, the border is secure, the border is secure. And while we were showing it, we couldn't see the earth because of all the bodies that were walking across the street. I encourage you to engage our 83 county sheriffs, our police officers, public and police and townships and cities, because we all want to help. We don't have anybody here trying to stop the ICE guys. We're ready to help.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for your leadership. You've been fantastic. It meant the world to me to have your endorsement when I got nominated for this position by President Trump, because you're going through the confirmation process and you want people to consider you as someone who would be able to come in and to do the job and to do the job well and to have the support of an organization that you represent, and you yourself meant the world to me, and gives you the strength to go through a process like that, to sit in front of Congress and say, here's my life, here's who I am, I just want to serve and I want to make this country safe again, and do what President Trump was asked to do by the American people. What do law enforcement officers feel that they need the most right now that they are lacking? As far as, I've seen in the Department of Homeland Security, so I have ICE, and then I also have Border Patrol, USCIS, which does all visas and worker programs, things like that, citizenship papers, all of that. I have weapons of mass destruction under the Department of Homeland Security. I have CISA, which is the cybersecurity agency of the nation. So anything that is said or done or sold on the internet, I'm responsible for. All of our ports of entry and the borders across it. We have FEMA as well. So all disasters go through the Department of Homeland Security, but most people don't know that DHS also and FEMA have the responsibility for the continuation of government. That should something terrible happen to this country, it is FEMA who runs this country. If we have the unprecedented situation happen. TSA is under my jurisdiction, so we have implemented some security concerns that people had talked about Real ID, which was many states are giving out driver's licenses to anybody that shows up. I don't know if your state is one of them, didn't have to prove citizenship in this country in order to get a driver's license, and in Michigan, did you just need a driver's license to go vote? I'm guessing that's one of the things that Real ID was a law that was passed over 20 years ago that we finally implemented, because it just says that you have to prove your legal status if you're going to get on an airplane, if you're going to be on public transportation, and so making sure that we're also fixing a lot in TSA that will be good, that I think people will be helpful for, that we'll be making more announcements on. And then Secret Service and FLETC are both under the Department of Homeland Security. So training our law enforcement officers and then partnering with other departments that train tribal are important. But for me, every day, I've seen ICE recruitment go up, Border Patrol recruitment has gone up, Secret Service recruitment has gone up over 200%. Record enrollment in Coast Guard, which I'm responsible for as well. What I'm seeing is that when you let people do their jobs for what they were called to do, and you support them and give them the training and the equipment that they need to do their jobs, that they feel fulfilled, that they're doing what they need. But every day, President Trump calls and talks to me and says, "What do you need, Kristi? What do you need?" This is clearly his priority. And I don't ever want to go to him and say, I don't know, or that I don't know exactly what it is. What you hear from your law enforcement officers, what is the thing that they need the most that we could give them at this point? And some of these law enforcement officers are serving in sanctuary cities and jurisdictions where politicians don't have their backs. And I think that's discouraging, but let me know.
I think that just to take that to the extreme, we just need support from the top. That's the main thing. And when you have somebody like the mayor in LA that's at the top,
Right.
That's a little tough to go to work. But recruiting and retaining police officers is the big difficult thing right now, because we recruit teenagers. We can't hire teenagers, but you have to convince a young person that this is the job they want before they're old enough to recruit them.
That's right.
It's a cultural thing. It's not the normal thing. And since we have no retirement health care, I said my next mission in Congress is to get TRICARE, the military health care for our guys when they retire, because they retire at 55 years of age and they have no health care. They have to go get a job.
Really?
So you want 65-year-old police guys driving around, or you want health care?
Yeah.
But that's the biggest thing. When I hear President Trump say that, and I hear it from you all the time, and I've always had it with Congressman James, who I consider to be a dear friend, that means a lot. That means a lot to the guys that's in the suit. We have such a respect for him, and that just bleeds off. When we hear that to us, it's like, hey, we did the right thing. And then when we say that to the young people around us, that's the next recruit.
I think you'll never convince somebody to sign up for a profession. I've said this about the military. You can't recruit people and kids to sign up for the military unless you show them that you respect the veterans that already served. Unless you show that you respect that. And we need to do that with law enforcement
Could I
officers.
ask the Congressman just a real quick question? Because we had a conversation a couple years ago where I said, the old Uncle Joe that used to talk to you about being a policeman now says you're crazy. And I said to him, what about the military? He says, I feel the same way about the military. I always wanted somebody to do that. But right now, at that time, has that changed?
No, typically people are acquainted with law enforcement. They're acquainted with fighting for their country in the military because they hear of their stories from mentors, their fathers, their uncles, and the same in law enforcement. It used to be a trade that people aspired to because you saw your Uncle Joey come back and you saw your dad come back, and it was respected. And so even though the riots from a few years ago when the cops were being assaulted, even though the Democrats are distancing themselves from defund the police the best they can, disrespect of the police is having tangible negative effect on our law enforcement officers. But President Trump's leadership is changing the tide. And one of the big steps we can take is through this one big, beautiful bill. We are actually putting an additional $60 billion to Customs and Border Patrol, and $2.5 billion of that is going back to local law enforcement. So we can train, so we can get the equipment, and so we can show the respect that our law enforcement officers so badly deserve.
Well, and the one thing that's true. One thing I've asked my team to do is to tell police officers stories. Because if you don't have a police officer in your family, or if you're, in high school trying to figure out what you want to do when you grow up, and you hear the story of someone why they decided to become a law enforcement officer, why they decided that they served so many years, the commitment that they had might inspire them to look at something that they didn't before. So we're going to start a media campaign telling the stories, letting them tell their stories to inspire our youth to look back at the profession, respect it, and inspire them to join and to be a part of keeping the country safe. I think it's we did that with veterans, and we've seen this veterans nationwide that recorded their stories for historical reasons, but also so we would remember and recruit individuals to the military. We need to do that with law enforcement as well.
Good idea.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. Let's please give our panelists a round of applause. We have a remarkable opportunity here today with President Trump's leadership, Secretary Noem's leadership, their transparency, their compassion. They understand there's nothing compassionate about open borders. There's nothing compassionate about human and drug traffickers killing Americans. And there's certainly nothing compassionate with a laissez-faire approach from our very dear and close friends in Canada. President Trump is using every lever at his disposal to keep you safe. And we are up here to say that he is absolutely on the right direction, tying USMCA negotiations, our trade negotiations, with our security. Illicit trade distorts markets, undermines fair competition, erodes public revenues, diminishes the benefits of legitimate traders that we're meant to enjoy under free trade, and hurts our economy as well as our national security. I appreciate the leadership role that you're taking here, and it's an honor. You mentioned something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I saw my friend Tudor over here smiling when you mentioned real IDs and shady elections. Don't get us started on 2020. Yeah, right. But you have my word that Michigan will not be a sanctuary state if I have anything to say about it. We will continue to partner with President Trump to secure our border and to make our nation safe. So, Madam Secretary, in the time that we have remaining, the floor is yours.
Sometimes I get tired of talking. I want to see if anybody out there has a question. Anybody? I know I'm not supposed to take questions from the crowd, but I'm going to do it anyways because I always break the rules. Yes, sir, stand up quick and ask your question.
My first question is, Chinese buying our real estate farmland. Second question is, just a few weeks ago or less, there was a fungus that was confiscated here in Detroit. If that fungus is bad enough to kill our crops, it'll make fentanyl like child's play.
That's exactly right.
What steps have Homeland Security done to fend that off?
Yeah. So you're exactly right. And let me talk, we have, when I was governor, we fought and passed a bill to prevent foreign evil governments from buying our farmland and buying land in our state, because it was China, but it was also 6 other countries that hate America and want to destroy us. And why on earth would we ever let them come up and not only infiltrate our society, but then buy up our land as well? Listen, I've worked on farming policy and ag policy for 30 years. So I watched as China came in and bought up all of our genetics, our chemicals and our fertilizers. Then they came in and they bought up all of our processing plants. A lot of our meat processing plants are owned by the Chinese government and by the CCP, or have ties to them. And then we are watching them now buy up our land. And I will tell you that when they control our food is when they will control us. If we think a pandemic was scary, you just wait until people go to the grocery store and they realize the only reason that they can't get food to feed their families is because China decided that day they weren't going to eat. So we have to recognize the threats we face as a homeland are coming at us from all directions. Joe Biden opened up the doors and let the enemy in, and they're still embedded here. We have ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists here. We have MS-13 TDA. We have cartel members. People are still embedded everywhere here and Chinese nationals and CCP members that are here that have a mission to destroy this country. We are the world power. And China specifically, we are the only thing standing in their way to them being the world power. And they don't have just a 5 or 10-year plan to take over. They have a thousands-year plan, not just to steal our IP, manipulate their currency, come after us in trade agreements and treat us unfairly, but they've also come in and used fentanyl to kill off our next generation of Americans. And they're doing it on purpose. So that is why it has to be all hands on deck and have a president as strong as President Trump to make sure we're securing our borders, but we're also continuing to clean out the garbage that was let into this country and to stop the drug trafficking and human trafficking and stop fueling the criminals and the terrorists that want to destroy America. But they are using biohazards, funguses. They will use genetics and whatever they have available to them in order to come in here and create economic destruction to destabilize our country. We just have to be smart enough and disciplined enough that while us in leadership make decisions, we recognize the threat, we meet it head on, but we can't forget to quit talking about it to the American people. I was in Georgia last night with campus security officers. So people from across the nation whose jobs it is to keep college campuses safe and secure. Can you imagine how miserable their jobs must be lately? I mean, with all of the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, violent activity we've seen, administrative leadership in our colleges that they've allowed to have happen, and the anti-Semitism that they've let go on college campuses and victimize so many of their students. But in talking to them, recognizing that we have an opportunity here to shut down. We allow free speech and support free speech. We don't talk very often about why we believe free speech is important. It's important because this country is run by the consent of the governed, which is incredibly important then that we have a public that is informed. So while we make the decisions that we make, and while we are standing strong, and the sheriff over here spends every day going out there and making his communities more safe and secure, we still have a responsibility to communicate to the public why we do what we do and why we allow people to speak freely, but we don't allow them to conduct acts of violence. And if we don't communicate this to the public and do events like this and get the media to show up once in a while and hope they tell the truth, and hope that people at home get to hear about the fact that the public needs to hear the truth about the threats that we face, but why this country is special, And why we have such a target on our back is because we are the only country that truly was built by founders who believed in the fact that we get our rights from God, and that we are people, and our government only gets its power from the consent of the governed. And we have a responsibility then that those who are governed, who are in this country, who live here, that they be informed. So when you leave here today, I hope that there's something here today that you're able to take and to go share with people. That President Trump, since he's been in office, the alien encounters at the northern border have gone down 71%. Huge numbers. We've got more resources here than we ever had before, and more is coming. And then we need Congress's support. We also are stopping ridiculous government funding that went to DEI stuff and sanctuary cities that don't help keep our country safe, and we're using everything we can to return money back to taxpayers, but making sure that we're doing what the federal government should be doing, and that is making sure that our country is safe. And then returning every other power that should be back to the states, and then elect good state leaders, get good state leaders that actually respect the people. So, one more question. Yes. Yes. We started this program back again, the 287G program, and I hate that we couldn't give it like some super cool name that made everybody remember. It's a 287G program, but it's a partnership where we can deputize law enforcement in state and local governments that gives them the same authorities as ICE officers to go out there and help us. And so we're working in task forces across the country to do this. But we also are going out now and starting recruiting people who are retired that want to come back. People that may want to step up and serve and put him through a training course that can help us. You've seen the National Guard get utilized in LA. They have been fantastic. President Trump has used his authority under Title X to say that they're going to be there and make sure that our law enforcement officers are going to be safe while they're there dealing with those criminal gangs and professional protest and riot violators that are out there. So yes, we are creating those partnerships. If you've got people in law enforcement here in this state that want to partner with us, we will absolutely love to deputize them and have them work alongside our ICE officers to give them the support and the backup that they need. Thank you for that question.
Well, thank you. I think we are running low on time, so perhaps one more question and we got to call it good.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. I'm Representative Jamie Thompson. I'm a state representative here in the state of Michigan. And one of the cities that I represent, the city of Taylor, they did sign on to that agreement with ICE. My question for you is how much more can you support them? Because I want to give a huge shout out right here in front of the media and everyone to Chief Blair for doing that for his law enforcement, because he is taking so much heat from the citizens of Taylor, and he is taking very much heat right now from the local school board, who actually put out a resolution to condemn that partnership, and they're calling for his resignation. And he's taking it really hard right now. He reached out to me as his state representative, asking me what I could do to help support him, because he believes in supporting the federal government and supporting our freedoms, and he's being greatly attacked for it right now. So,
okay, so I'm going to have one of my staff come and get your phone number so that we can talk directly to him to see what he needs. Because so many times in some areas we've seen sheriffs sign into these agreements that it maybe was politically beneficial for them and they didn't actually really commit resources to it. So maybe one of the things we could do is help him specifically target the violent criminals in his county and help him telegraph that to the public about why he signed that agreement, and it's to get the murderers and the rapists and the drugs off his streets, and that's his job and the oath that he took as sheriff. We can help him tell that story and make sure that he has the ability to target those individuals that might be there in his jurisdiction, and then he can talk about the fact that he got those bad guys off the street. A lot of people are thinking, and I'll tell you that 90% of what you hear on the news that DHS or ICE is out there doing, we've never once deported a U.S. citizen. We've never separated a mother from her child. These parents are all making the decisions if they're here illegally and they're going back to their countries to keep their families together. There's one time where we had a situation where the parents did not take their children with them when they left the country, and that's because the dad was one of the leaders of TDA. He was the head of their human trafficking ring, and their mother was running the prostitution ring, the sexual slavery. So both of them were TDA leadership, trafficking of human individuals, and they did not leave with their children. Their children went to safer parents who actually have some values and understand what it's like to raise children in a situation like that. But I will tell you that the things that you hear on the news and what you hear from the fake news, ICE has been following the law, doing due process, getting the paperwork done, doing it correctly, going after the criminals and the worst of the worst, exactly like President Trump has told us. But we'll connect with you and get his information so we can make sure he knows who the worst of the worst is in his jurisdiction, and he can make sure the public knows how he's making their community safer. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Madam Secretary, thank you for your courage, your leadership, compassion, and for being here to secure our northern border.
Thank
God
you
bless
all
you.
for being here. Thank you. You're all great Americans.
And the Statue of Liberty started shaking.